Hi everyone, so this is my recording of chapter 32 and it's quite a short chapter, mostly dealing with Offred and the cigarette, and then her conversation with the commander, which gives us some more information about the history of Gilead. So let's get reading. Rita sits at the kitchen table. There is a glass bowl with ice cubes floating in it on the table in front of her. Radishes made into flowers, roses or tulips bob in it. On the chopping board in front of her, she's cutting more with a paring knife. Her large hands deft, which means fast moving and clever, indifferent. So again, we have this floral image, which represents fertility, which comes in again and again and again. And this is in this kind of heated, hot kitchen environment that Rita's working in. And so she's keeping these decorations that she's making out of the radishes into different shapes in a bowl of iced water so that they don't go bad, because she's preparing them as decorations for a meal. And so within all of this floral imagery again, we've got not only this reshaping, so radishes made into flowers, this idea of transformation, but also this idea of violence and destruction, so cutting, chopping, the paring knife. And again, we have this sense that often with Gilead, that not everything is as it seems. So, you know, it might look like a flower, a rose or a tulip, but actually it's a radish. And that's a lovely kind of image that Atwood gives us of one of the big ideas in a novel. The rest of her body, so this is Rita, does not move, nor does her face. And so again, we always have that sense of utility and practical, kind of mechanical actions with the female characters. It's as if she's doing it in her sleep, this knife trick. On the white enamel surface is a pile of radishes, washed but uncut, little Aztec hearts. She hardly bothers to look up as I enter. "You've got it all, huh?" is what she says, and as I take the parcels out for her inspection. And again, that reminder, she doesn't bother to look up, you've got it all, that kind of, she exists for this purpose. "Could I have a match?" I ask, surprising how much like a small begging child she makes me feel simply by her scowl, her stolidity, which is her kind of unmoving nature, how inopportune and whiny. And again, so we've got that lovely infantilized language that's used about the handmaids. "Matches," she says. "What do you want matches for?" "She said I could have one," I say, not wanting to admit the cigarette. "Who said?" She continues with the radishes, her rhythm unbroken. "No call for you to have matches. Burn the house down." And of course, that idea of the revenge, that sense that they're always very aware that the handmaids are in a position that they don't want to be in. "You can go and ask her if you like," I say. "She's out on the lawn." Rita rolls her eyes to the ceiling as if consulting silently with some deity there. Then she sighs, rises heavily, wipes her hands with ostentation, which is kind of exaggerated performance almost, on her apron to show me how much trouble I am. She goes to the cupboard over the sink, taking her time, locates the key bunch in her pocket and unlocks the cupboard door. And so again, we've got this idea that Rita's constantly treating Offred like a child. But again, this sense of kind of segregation and division in Gilead. "Keep them in here. Summer," she says, as if to herself. "No call for a fire in this weather." I remember from April, it's Cora who lights the fires in the sitting room and the dining room in cooler weather. The matches are wooden ones, in a cardboard sliding top box, the kind I used to covet in order to make dolls' drawers out of them. She opens the box, peers in as if deciding which one she'll let me have. Her own business, she mutters. No way you can tell her a thing. She plunges her big hand down, selects a match, hands it over to me. Now, don't you go setting fire to nothing, she says. Not them curtains in your room. Too hot the way it is. And so we've got this reference to Serena Joy here, her own business, making her own rules. No way you can tell her a thing. And it's another sense here. We've talked about the subversion of the regime's regulations, and we've got this kind of this constant edging around the boundaries. Now, there probably isn't a law about who is and who isn't allowed matches, but just this constant sense that there is this pushing of boundaries in Gilead. So don't go setting her fire to anything. I won't, I say. That's not what it's for. She doesn't deign to ask me what it is for. Don't care if you eat it or what, she said. She said you could have one, so I will give you one, is all. She turns away from me and sits again at the table, then picks up an ice cube out of the bowl and pops it in her mouth. This is an unusual thing for her to do. I've never seen her nibble while she's working. You can have one of them too, she says. A shame making you wear all them pillowcases on your head in this weather. And we see a rare occurrence of sympathy, perhaps, or even empathy for Offred in this moment by Rita. And then this offer of an ice cube, which she would never have done. If you remember over here on the other page, she hardly bothers, looks up as Offred comes into the room. So there's a hint here that Serena Joy, by allowing Offred to have a match for whatever reason, which Rita doesn't understand, has somehow changed Offred's status with Rita. And so she is now higher status, perhaps, or given more credence, given more value. And so she offers her one as if a sense of equality. And then again, just always this lovely description of what the handmaids are wearing. Then wear those pillowcases on your head. She's talking about the wings that she has to wear that covers her hair. But of course, it reminds us of the people executed on the wall, and we have those constant kind of sinister undertones. I'm surprised. She doesn't usually offer me anything. Maybe she feels that I've risen in status enough to be given a match. She can afford her own small gesture. Have I become suddenly one of those who must be appeased? And so we've talked about all the different forms of collusion, and now there's a form of collusion here with Rita. Thank you, I say. I transfer the match carefully to my zippered sleeve where the cigarette is, so it won't get wet, and take an ice cube. Those radishes are pretty, I say, in return for the gift she's made me of her own free will. I do like to do things right is all, she said, grumpy again. No sense otherwise. And that brief moment is over, just as her brief moment with Serena Joy was over. I go along the passage, up the stairs, hurrying, because she's got this match and this cigarette. There's a sense of excitement. Something different has happened. In the carved hallway mirror, I flit past a red shape at the edge of my own field of vision, a wraith of red smoke. I have smoke on my mind, all right. Already I can feel it in my mouth, drawn down into the lungs, filling me in a long, rich, dirty cinnamon sigh, and then the rush as the nicotine hits the bloodstream. And of course you'll remember with Offred that we have this kind of very strong, tangible, tactile experiences that she has. And as she thinks about the cigarette, it's almost like she's literally reliving the experience of smoking as she draws it all the way down into her lungs. And so we have this interesting idea, this different priorities that she has now. For her, smoking and nicotine isn't about the difference between life and death and whether something's healthy or unhealthy. But now this is to live in this moment, this tactile experience, which she finds very satisfying. Oh, hold on. There we go. After all this time, it could make me sick. I wouldn't be surprised, but even the thought is welcome. Along the corridor I go. Where should I do it? In the bathroom, running the water to clear the air. In the bedroom, wheezy puffs out of an open window. Who's to catch me at it? Who knows? And it's this sense that these choices and this decision that she's making is in itself very exciting for her. Even as I luxuriate in the future this way, rolling anticipation around my mouth, I think of something else. I don't need to smoke this cigarette. And she presents herself with another choice. And of course, this sense of freedom in making these choices is kind of overwhelming and exciting for her. I could shred it up and flush it down the toilet, or I could eat it and get high that way. That can work too. A little at a time, save up the rest. That way I could keep the match. I could make a small hole in the mattress and slide it carefully in. Such a thin thing would never be noticed. There it would be, at night, under me, while I'm in bed, sleeping on it. And just like the carving in the wardrobe, this idea of the match becomes this symbol of hope, and she could just slip it into her bed. I could burn the house down. Such a fine thought. It makes me shiver. An escape, quick and narrow. And so again, this possibility, this opportunity, perhaps revenge where she kills others, perhaps suicide where she kills herself. And again, we don't know what the particular thought is because it's an escape, and we don't know whether that's an escaping the house or escaping being a handmaid by killing herself. It's double meaning. I lie on my bed pretending to nap, and of course we have this kind of avoidance that she takes often when she's got these moments, and then this fragmented narrative again, so we slip in and out of the kind of present and the past. So the commander last night, fingers together, looking at me as I sat rubbing oily lotion into my hand. So as she pretends to take a nap, she retells for us the conversation that she had with the commander last night. We've got a little bit of the male gaze here, looking at me as I sat rubbing the oily lotion, so this kind of female beauty ritual. Odds. I thought about asking him for a cigarette, but I decided against it. I know enough not to ask for too much at once. I don't want him to think I'm using him. I also don't want to interrupt him. And so it's kind of, she finds it interesting that, there we go, that she had been thinking about asking him for a cigarette. Sorry about this shadow. So she knows not to ask for too much at once. There are limits to what she can and can't ask for, and she also doesn't want to interrupt him because he's had too much to drink and has got very chatty. Last night he had a drink, scotch and water. He's taken to drinking in my presence to unwind after the day, he says. I'm to gather he is under pressure. He never offers me one, and I don't ask. We both know what my body is made for. When I kiss him goodnight, as if I mean it, his breath smells of alcohol, and I breathe it in like smoke. I admit I relish it, this lick of dissipation. So, firstly, we've got this idea that he has a drink with her to unwind. He's under pressure. And so we have him here then constructing this kind of fake or faux pseudo marriage relationship with her, where he sits and has a drink with her in the evening, and this is the construction of domestic partnership. But then in that, Offred can't step out of her reality any more than that, so he never offers her one. They both know what her body is for, which is of course to procreate. And then we have again this idea, when I kiss him goodnight, as if I mean it. And so this again is the idea that she's there for a reason. He said that she needs to kiss him as if she means it. And so we still have this utility of her body, but it's a utility of a different kind now. Sometimes after a few drinks he becomes silly and cheats at Scrabble. He encourages me to do so too. And so we have this kind of infantile, childish behaviour which again, to a certain extent, belies some of the sinister danger that she's in. He encourages me to do it too, and we take extra letters and make words that don't exist, words like smirt and crup, giggling over them. Sometimes he turns on his shortwave radio, displaying for me a minute or two of Radio Free America to show me he can. And so this then, obviously, he's in Gilead, so they wouldn't have a Radio America in Gilead. So this must be one of the pirate radio stations of the resistance. And so he does this as a show of power, that he can access this. And we just need to now keep asking ourselves, what is his end game here? What is his end game by revealing all of these things with Offred, by cultivating these scenes and this relationship with Offred? Because it is obviously not what we, it's not just about sex. Then he turns it off again. Damn Cubans, he says, and all that filth about universal daycare. And of course he would criticise that idea of children being in daycare, because the mother's role is in the house. Sometimes after the games he sits on the floor beside my chair, holding my hand. His head is a little below mine, so that he looks up at me. At me, it's a juvenile angle. It must amuse him, this fake subservience. So he places himself beneath her, puts Offred in the dominant role, and then this fake subservience, this game for both of them, as to this kind of fake relationship that they're in. And we have to kind of consider, to who has the most to risk here. He's way up there, says Offglen. He's at the top. I mean the very top. And this explains for us Offglen's interest in speaking to Offred for the first time about the Mayday resistance, is how senior he is. They need Offred as a plant to feed them information about her commander, and this is the reason why Offglen has risked to speak to her. So again, on one hand, we feel like it's just about human connection. Oh, there is a resistance, have you heard about it? But actually, the resistance has a purpose, and they would never have selected Offred if she wasn't at this Commander Fred's house. At such times, it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that he's at the very top when he's drunkenly snuggling with her. Occasionally, I try to put myself in his position. I do this as a tactic to guess in advance how he may be moved to behave towards me. And we have a lot of this kind of trying to predict his behaviour, to guess what he's going to happen. And that just reminds me that that's quite similar to the creature's behaviour towards the DeLacys in Frankenstein. This desire to guess and predict how they're going to behave. It's difficult for me to believe I have power over him of any sort, but I do. And we have that. Women can exert power over men. Although it's of an equivocal kind, so it's reciprocal, it's give and take. Once in a while, I think I can see myself, through, though blurry, as he may see me. There are things he wants to prove to me, gifts he wants to bestow, and then we've got services he wants to render, tendernesses he wants to inspire, and that's the give and take, the reciprocal nature of their relationship. He wants, all right, especially after a few drinks. Sometimes he becomes querulous, which is whining or petulant. At other times, philosophical, or he wishes to explain things, justify himself, which is to justify Gilead, as last night. And then we get this interesting justification of some of the ideas behind Gilead. The problem wasn't with the women, he said, and this is this idea that actually Gilead solves more than just the problem of infertility, which of course could have been solved by all sorts of other means, through science, through medicine, through, they didn't have to completely deconstruct society as we know it. So it's not the problem of infertility that they're looking at now. It's the problem of masculinity, which of course in a patriarchy would be the focus. The main problem, Okay, so the main problem, patriarchy, was with the men. There was nothing for them anymore. And then I'm just going to read through this section and then I'll explain. Nothing, I said, but they had, and she leaves it unsaid. There was nothing for them to do, he says. But they could make money, I say, a little nastily. Right now I'm not afraid of him. It's hard to be afraid of a man who's sitting watching you put hand lotion on. Their lack of fear is dangerous. It's not enough, he says. It's too abstract. I mean, there was nothing for them to do with women. What do you mean, I say? What about all the porny corners? It was all over the place. They even had it motorised. I'm not talking about sex, he says. That was part of it. The sex was too easy. Anyone could buy it. There was nothing to work for, nothing to fight for. We have stats from the time. You know what they were complaining about the most? And we'll just get on to that. So we have this interesting analysis of masculinity in pre-Gilead America. And this is this idea that capitalism, as I've said down here, hands everything to you on a plate. Anything that you need or want, you can go out and buy it, including pornography, which you can, watch in a kind of, anywhere, easily accessible. And so there's nothing to work for. So men in pre-Gilead America had no struggle, no competition. And what the commander seems to be suggesting is that masculinity in its primal state requires that competition, requires the elements of the struggle, that is the kind of caveman version of masculinity. And they had nothing to fight for. They got a job, they earned money, they got women, they got married, they got houses, they got cars, they had sex, they had children, and it comes too easily and there's no struggle. And so the world of pre-Gilead America was one of ease, and actually this began to damage masculinity. So you know what they were complaining about the most? These men, this is his market research that he's been doing in his job. Inability to feel. Men were turning off sex even. They were turning off marriage, and that's this idea that modern masculinity is dissatisfying for a man. Do they feel now, I say? Yes, he says, looking at me. They do. He stands up, comes around the desk to the chair where I'm sitting. He puts his hands on my shoulders from behind. I can't see him, and he demonstrates his power. And of course they do feel in Gilead, because in Gilead men are like men. They are conquerors. They are, in competition. They are struggling and fighting. I like to know what you think, he says, from behind me. And then we have this, I don't think a lot, I say lightly. What he wants is intimacy, but I can't give him that. She can't possibly let him in. There's hardly any point in my thinking, I say. What I think doesn't matter. And so we have this moment where he appears to reach to her and see her as an individual, and she knows her place is to remind him that actually she as an individual has no place at all, which is the only reason he can tell me things. Come on, he says, pressing a little with his hands. Remember, he stood behind her with his hands on her shoulders in that kind of position of power and potentially threat. I'm interested in your opinion. You're intelligent enough, and I love that kind of limiting clause there for a woman. It's almost like he's saying, you must have an opinion about what I say, what we've done, and that's Gilead, he says, how things have worked out. I hold myself very still. I try to empty my mind. I think about the sky at night when there's no moon. So she just empties it with this darkness that she needs in her mind. I have no opinion, I say, because despite his persuasion, despite his seeming interest, she cannot say what her opinion is. That would be very dangerous. And also, he would never understand her side of it. He sighs, relaxes, and then relaxes his hands, but leaves them on my shoulders. He knows what I think, all right. You can't make an omelette without breaking eggs, is what he said. We thought we could do better. And we have this kind of tongue-in-cheek moment where he uses this kind of traditional idiom. It's a little bit like don't cry over spilled milk or put all your eggs in one basket. So the idea is that you can't make something new without breaking something first. So every creation is an act of destruction. But of course, the destruction is entirely personal and physical for the handmaids. We thought we could do better. Better, I say in a small voice. How can he think this is better? And then we have this amazing truth that's spoken by him of politics and leadership everywhere. Better never means better for everyone, he says. It always means worse for some. And of course, if you see him, and we're knowing that he's the centre of the commanders, and then when he talked about the main problem earlier on was with the men, we can see that actually what they meant was better for men and not better for women. I lie flat. Remember, she's laying in her bed pretending to sleep. She's got this match, and then she retells us what happened the night before. The damp air above me like a lid, and we get all of this death imagery here, like earth. I wish it would rain. Better still, a thunderstorm, black clouds, lightning, ear-splitting sound. The electricity might go off, and we have this kind of this reminder of the power of nature, which of course is one of the things that Gilead are trying to overcome through this infertility. But then this desire for a storm again, this desire for something, passion, for fear, for something. So if the electricity goes off, I could go down to the kitchen, then say I'm afraid, sit with Rita and Cora around the kitchen table. They would permit my fear because it's one they share. They'd let me in, and again we have that continual desire for human connection, just like the commander. There would be candles burning. We would watch each other's faces come and go in the flickering light, in the white flashes of jagged light from outside the windows. Oh Lord, Cora would say, oh Lord, save us. The air would be clear after that and lighter. I look up at the ceiling, the round circle of plaster flowers. Draw a circle and step into it. It'll protect you. That's the idea of the magic fairy circle. From the centre of the chandelier, and from the chandelier a twisted strip of sheet hanging down, and we have this visualization. It's almost like this echo memory that she has of the previous handmaid. That's where she was swinging, just lightly, like a pendulum. Remember the tick-tick of the time that controls her life. The way you could swing as a child, hanging by your hands from the tree branch. She was safe then, protected altogether. By the time Cora opened the door, sometimes I think she's still here, in here, with me. And of course we have this sense of doubling, because in a lot of ways she is, because they're living completely double lives. I feel buried. And what's interesting is, what is it that she feels buried by? She has this illicit relationship with the commander, which hasn't gone any further than kissing, but of course that's terribly illegal and dangerous already. Now she has this kind of secret communication with Ofglen about the Mayday resistance, and then finally she has this agreement that she's made with Serena Joy about sleeping with Nick in order to try and get pregnant. And so what is it that's burying her and overwhelming her? And I think that's worth considering, the different nuances there. And that is it for this chapter.